There's a race for president of the United States. The current sitting president is running for re-election. 3.5 months from the election, he decides not to run. The sitting vice president then takes the mantle, running against a former president of the United States who had been running for 10 years with 107.
People didn't used to get sick of the candidates because you barely ever saw them unless you happened to be standing at the back end of a train. But now we never stop seeing them. The winner in modern elections comes down to who were less tired.
Bill Maher recently took aim at Kamala Harris with a pointed critique that blended sharp analysis with his trademark wit. The outspoken host openly voiced concerns about what he views as a lack of clear direction and an ongoing disconnect from the public. His commentary felt direct, critical, and compelling, making it difficult for viewers to tune out.
While Biden was still hanging on to be the candidate, many of the pundits said that to switch him out this late would cause chaos. Yeah, that was never my position. And indeed, what happened was Kamala Harris said, "Oh, look, I guess it's my turn." And the next day, a grateful nation handed her $500 million. The only reason we stay stuck in permanent campaign mode is money. It's estimated this year that $16 billion will be spent on political ads. It's time we admit that the endless campaign exists only to enrich advertisers, political consultants, and what's left of the news media.
The Democratic National Committee seemed to encounter notable strategic difficulties in managing the 2024 nomination process. Questions had already been building before Kamala Harris became the nominee, as Joe Biden stayed in the race until a challenging debate performance prompted a sudden change in course. Once Harris entered the contest, the party launched a significant financial and organizational effort to steady the campaign. Still, this wave of support didn't fully resolve deeper concerns like inconsistent messaging, voter uncertainty, and overall confidence in leadership. In the end, the move is often seen as a hurried pivot that struggled to establish a clear and effective path forward.
The fact that we're just getting to know Kamala isn't bad, it's great. Great for her, great for the country. People didn't used to get sick of the candidates because you barely ever saw them unless you happened to be standing at the back end of a train. But now we never stop seeing them. The winner in modern elections comes down to who we're less tired of. They're just constantly on us. TV, radio, the mail, on our phones, texting. Hey, Bill, Tim Walz here. You up? They're everywhere all the time. Jesus Christ, fuck off. Let mommy put her purse down.
In this segment, Bill Maher pushes back on claims from some supporters of Kamala Harris who argue that voters didn't have enough time to get to know her during a shortened campaign. Maher, however, appears skeptical of that reasoning to point out that Harris still had access to nearly $500 million in campaign funding, a massive amount that powered extensive advertising, celebrity backing, and highly coordinated public appearances. With prominent figures boosting her visibility across both social media and traditional outlets, her presence was hard to overlook. From this angle, the issue wasn't limited exposure. If anything, voters encountered her messaging repeatedly. As Maher suggests, the deeper problem may have been less about unfamiliarity and more about a sense of public fatigue setting in well before Election Day.
President Harris, in her new book, said it was, quote, recklessness for former President Biden's allies to leave the decision about running for re-election up to him and his family. Do you agree with her? Was it recklessness?
Look, I wasn't there, Kristen, on this, and I think the president, again, got us through COVID, ushered us through, brought the economy back from the edge. I think there's questions about this, and I want to be very clear. On me talking about the MRI, ageism is a real thing. Ableism is a real thing that we need to be careful of with people. And I think Donald Trump made a cottage industry out of attacking Joe Biden's competency, and it seemed like that got reported a lot.
Here it is again. Another pivot away from the original question. What was asked was fairly direct, yet Tim Walz appeared to steer the conversation in a different direction rather than respond head-on. Earlier, Kamala Harris had already outlined her stance, pointing to Joe Biden's inner circle and suggesting the decision to stay in the race lingered too long with him and his family, contributing to later instability. From her point of view, that delay, and the absence of earlier intervention, played a role in the broader challenges that followed. Instead of addressing that specific claim, Walz redirected attention toward Donald Trump, reframing the discussion around him rather than the internal dynamics under scrutiny. The result is a clear shift in focus, moving away from the original issue and toward a different political target.
Whether that decision should have been made sooner, history will determine that. What I do know is that going forward, we need somebody in office who's actually going to tackle the things Americans need, whether it's about costs or whether it's about our national security needs and honoring those with our allies. And I think maybe there's a lesson to be learned from what happened with President Biden. If that's the case, it should certainly be applied right now to this president who is putting Americans at risk, is reckless, and is not doing what he's asked to do.
Once again, the conversation circles back to Donald Trump, even in moments where he isn't directly central to the point at hand. In remarks attributed to Tim Walz, there's clear criticism of Trump, but also a broader reflection that seems to touch on internal Democratic dynamics. When Walz speaks about lessons to be learned from Joe Biden, it doesn't come across as purely complimentary. Instead, it can be read as a subtle acknowledgement that Biden's timing and decisions around stepping aside may have added to complications within the party. This perspective connects with a wider conversation among Democrats, including earlier comments from Kamala Harris, about how delays and transitions may have affected the party's overall standing. So while Trump remains part of the rhetorical backdrop, the underlying takeaway also turns inward, raising questions about strategy and leadership timing within the Democratic camp itself.
President Kamala Harris has left the door open to potentially run for office again. Do you still think she's the strongest person to run for president in 2028?
Well, I'm glad she's out there, and I'm glad a whole lot of other people are out there, because I think Donald Trump sucks up so much oxygen. We need to have the Democratic Party out on the field, the broad, inclusive Democratic Party, talking about making life more affordable, talking about protecting freedoms, and I think Kamala Harris does a wonderful job with that. If she chooses to run, that betters all of us. We will have the process. We'll go through. I'm sure there'll be a lot of folks throw their hat into the ring, but that's good, and we need to make sure that we're providing the alternative that America's asking.
This is why some observers draw parallels between Kamala Harris and Tim Walz when it comes to communication style and political positioning. Like Harris, Walz has at times been viewed as measured, especially when facing high-pressure questions that call for a clear yes or no response. For instance, when asked whether he sees Harris as a strong potential candidate for 2028, Walz didn't give a firm endorsement or dismissal. That kind of careful, non-committal answer tends to stand out in a political climate where directness is often expected. Interpretations of that hesitation can vary. Some may see it as standard political caution, while others might read it as uncertainty about Harris's future electoral prospects, particularly in light of the scrutiny following the 2024 race. There's also the possibility that it reflects an effort to keep options open within the Democratic field as new figures begin to emerge. In that sense, Walz's response may say less about a definitive stance and more about the ambiguity that often shapes early campaign speculation, where restraint or vagueness can invite multiple, sometimes competing, interpretations.
I think she had a message last year that I'm proud of. I think, did it break through enough? Obviously not, but it's still a message that works, making sure that America is affordable for all, people feel included, and we tackle the tough.
This perspective aligns with arguments often made by Bill Maher, who has suggested that many voters struggle to fully connect with Kamala Harris's messaging. In his view, the challenge wasn't visibility. She remained highly present through interviews, rallies, and national media coverage. But how effectively those appearances translated into clear and relatable communication. Critics argue that her explanations could sometimes feel overly detailed or hard to immediately process, leaving parts of the audience uncertain about her core message. Instead of a straightforward sense of clarity or reassurance, viewers were occasionally left interpreting her intent rather than absorbing it directly. Maher's broader point centers on a key idea in political communication. Frequency alone isn't enough. Messages also need to be accessible, grounded in everyday concerns, and easy to understand in real time. When communication feels overly polished, abstract, or disconnected, It can create distance between a candidate and the public. Over time, that gap may contribute to disengagement or frustration, and in that sense, the discussion extends beyond individual personality or performance and speaks to a wider debate about clarity, relatability, and how effectively political leaders translate their ideas into language that resonates with the people they aim to reach.
Primary reason do you think that you lost?
There are many factors, I think, that played into the outcome of that election, but I think probably one of the biggest in my mind is we just didn't have enough time.
You didn't have enough
time. We didn't have enough time.
Oh, yeah. Well, you didn't.
And, one of the reasons I wrote the book is this is unprecedented. Think about this.
Yeah.
That there's a race for president of the United States. The current sitting president is running for re-election. 3.5 months from the election, he decides not to run. The sitting vice president then takes the mantle, running against a former president of the United States who had been running for 10 years with 107 days.
At this stage, some critics argue that Kamala Harris has at times adjusted her messaging in ways that seem intended to reinforce or steady her campaign narrative. One example often cited is her suggestion that Donald Trump benefited from having previously served as president during his political comeback. Critics question that claim, pointing out that Harris herself held the vice presidency under Joe Biden, a role they argue also brings substantial national visibility and influence. They also frame this within a wider political context. Throughout the Biden administration, Trump remained a central focus of Democratic messaging, with continued criticism of his policies, leadership style, and legal issues keeping him firmly in the public spotlight. From this viewpoint, some see Harris's argument about Trump's advantage as misaligned with the broader dynamics of the race. Rather than emphasizing internal campaign decisions, critics interpret such framing as part of a pattern of shifting attention outward, recasting outcomes in a way that sidesteps deeper reflection on strategic choices made within the campaign itself.
Piece of what is unprecedented and a bit historical about that race, it is the closest presidential race in the 21st century in terms of the outcome.
Wow. Say that again, because he likes to say over and over again he's got a mandate.
And that's part of why I wrote this book, because history will talk about this race. It is part of American history. And it was important to me that when history is written, that my voice be present about what that experience is.
Sometimes observers question how effectively Kamala Harris's messaging connected with voters, with critics arguing that her communication didn't always feel clear or closely tied to everyday concerns. At the same time, many analysts contend that the 2024 election outcome was shaped less by messaging style and more by broader electoral dynamics. Donald Trump ultimately secured 312 electoral votes to Harris's 226 and also won the national popular vote, an outcome some view as a significant shift not seen for Republicans in roughly 2 decades. Looking at the bigger picture, his victory is often linked to evolving voter priorities and behavior. Exit data suggested gains among certain demographic groups compared to previous elections, alongside a strong focus on economic concerns like inflation and the rising cost of living. For many voters, the result reflected dissatisfaction with current conditions, driven by financial pressure and frustration with the party in power. From this perspective, Trump's win can be seen not only as a reflection of his political position, but also as an indicator of broader changes in public sentiment. At the same time, critics maintain that Harris faced ongoing challenges in delivering a consistently clear and accessible campaign message, despite high visibility and prominent support. In the end, the contrast some analysts point to centers on perception and execution, clarity versus complexity, momentum versus missed opportunities, and how those factors may have shaped the final result.